Hi, this is Katherine Tipper and Kalin Jordan, and we are doing the Planarchy podcast and kind of looking at the 401k retirement industry with kind of a little bit of a different look, challenging the three-piece suit view of the industry, and actually trying to look at kind of fresher looks at it. So, Kalin, we're here with Nicole Kelly and Amanda Miranda, who are our Generation Z people at Hunter Benefits, and I'm so excited to have fresh views and intelligent views. Everybody wants to go the last generation. Everybody kind of goes, but I think you are stellar members of this generation. Can you go through with us real briefly, Amanda first, and then Nicole, what are your roles at Hunter Benefits?
Yes, so I process loans and distributions at Hunter Benefits, and I'm also a team lead for our loans and distributions group.
And very similarly, Amanda is my team lead on the loans and distributions team. Processing loans, distributions, and helping plan participants take out withdrawals from their plans.
You are the people that most people in the plans really want to make sure do a good job. When you finally want your money out of the plan, you want competent people doing it. So Kalin, you kick us off with the lightning round, how we get to know everybody.
Yeah, great. We're really excited to have you on, both of you. I'd love to, if you could tell me a time in your professional life when you felt like the odd person out in the room.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this. I've had a couple different careers at this point, but I think one of the moments where I felt kind of immediately the odd person out of the room was right out of college. I began my career as a registered veterinary technician in ER and ICU. And at that time, I had a lot of textbook knowledge on that subject matter, but my clinical skills were still needing to be refined, and my environment was very fast-paced. The people I worked with were all older and had years of experience under their belts. So I think just being young and new to that field really had me feeling kind of like a stranger in some regards. But luckily, the people I worked with were all fantastic, and they took me under their wing, and I started to adapt. But yeah, those first days or weeks, I was like, wow, what have I gotten myself into? So,
I would say for me, the moment that comes to mind is the first job that I had in the fashion industry. I went to school for writing. I was a creative writer. But when I went into the fashion industry, I was invited to marketing meetings, go-to-market meetings, with a lot of high-level leadership where they were talking business strategy and used a lot of technical terms that kind of went right over my head as somebody so new to the industry. And I didn't really see how that related to my career as a writer at first, but I quickly realized that a lot of their strategies did inform the copy that I had to write to support the marketing strategy. So it was a tough adjustment period trying to learn just like the technical terms and that jargon before really finding my place in the industry.
Yep. I'm sure you've loved the jargon we throw at you here. Okay,
what song would you choose as your personal theme song when you walk into a room?
Yeah, I would probably choose "I Want to Break Free" by Queen. I don't know, it's a good sing along. I do not have a singing voice, but I will belt that one out. And yeah, it just there's a point where he sings like, "I've got to make it on my own." I'm like, yeah, that's me. I got to do it. Figure it out. So
I think I would choose the song "Unwritten" by Natasha Bedingfield. I just love the message of kind of embracing the moment, living for every opportunity. And it's one that I just roll my windows down in the car and like to sing, very similar to Amanda.
Get the good vibes going. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fantastic.
These are bangers, these choices. Okay, last lightning round question. If you had to teach a masterclass on something you're passionate about and it could not be work related, what would the title of the class be?
Mine would probably be an introduction into journaling. Make it personal, not perfect. That's something I always have to tell myself. I do try to keep a regular journal on the side. So,
in my free time, I am a tap dancer. So I think I would teach a master class called Tappy Hour and just teach the basics of tap dance.
Do you still tap dance, Nicole?
I do. I take an adult class every Tuesday evening.
Oh, is it
wow.
at where?
We do a recital.
I gotta
Yeah.
sign up for this. I haven't taken tap since I was probably like 12. It used to be my favorite dance class to go to.
Yeah, it was my favorite growing up. I continued in college, and then when I moved here to Florida, I found a studio nearby, and so I just joined and took a shot. Yeah,
Wow.
it's a lot of fun.
Fantastic. That's cool. Okay.
Okay.
Kalin, you're still up.
Yeah, how do we get here? Okay, and you guys did give us a sense of kind of like where your careers were earlier, but I would love to know 15 years ago, what were you doing?
So 15 years ago, I was 13. Yeah, I was a pretty
About
active
time.
kid. I was playing soccer, cross country. I was playing violin at the time.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, I was beginning 8th grade. So a lot has changed since then.
Did not think about
Yeah.
401k plans then, I'm sure.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, same here. I was probably 12, 13 years old too. Dancing competitively, so that took up a lot of my after school time. I was in the literary magazine, babysitting and dog sitting to make a little extra cash.
Nice to know things were pretty normal
Yeah.
15 years
Gosh,
ago.
you're making us feel old.
Thank God.
What-
Okay.
And what did you think you'd be doing in 15 years? You'd be, at that point, probably like out of school. Did you think about, is this where you expected to be?
Oh, absolutely not. No, I thought I was going to be a writer or librarian, and specifically, I was like, I'm going to be a librarian in Montana or Maine, and I work with loans and distributions for 401ks in Chicago, so very, very different.
Yeah. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Even in college, I still had no idea what I wanted to do. But I think at such a young age, I kind of always had a dream to be a published author. So that is still the dream. Maybe one day that'll happen. But
Yep.
I always wanted to be a writer.
I think there's a lot more opportunity to get out there with writing. It's just the channels. There's 5 kajillion channels you can write for.
Yes.
So that fractured market. So
Yeah. Okay. Last question of at least this section. What have your experiences outside of compliance taught you that you bring to work every day?
Yeah, I think personally, I've really developed a really great sense or great attention to detail, and I really credit my time as a registered veterinary technician. Once again, I worked in the ER and ICU, so there's a lot going on, and we had a lot of critical patients. Biggest difference between working with human patients and animal patients is animal patients can't tell you what's going on. So you really had to pay attention to their body language and just other markers that we would look at to kind of indicate how they were doing and their overall status. So I think I bring that attention to detail into my work here, even to this day, and that's something I'm really proud of. And I think it's really important in the work that we do as well to make sure that our plans stay in compliance with the IRS and with their own documents. So, yeah.
I would say, having come from such a fast-paced industry like the fashion industry, and I worked in politics for a little bit, writing for politics, I really got a keen sense of how to be a creative problem solver and kind of think on my feet quickly with how much turnover there was in those industries. So I definitely bring that with me to always look for new ways to find solutions and answer different questions to problems that plan participants might have and different clients might have. So definitely a skill I use daily.
wow, I guess I'm kind of in awe that sometimes I feel like our industry is fast-paced, and I don't think it should be, right? I really think things should go slowly, but those are good skills to have in what the current environment is on all the different regs that keep coming out that have to be interpreted and then explained. So, okay, so let's get into the generational perspective. So you both mentioned feeling on the cusp between Generation Z and Millennials, like you weren't even really sure you were which one you were in. How does that kind of time period you think have you reflect on retirement and financial planning? Does this generation, do you have a certain feel to you about what planning is?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I think there's a part of me that really wants to follow in my parents' footsteps, kind of like what they thought was a good a good financial plan for the future. I want to do what they did, but at the same time, I think I'm recognizing that with our ever changing world, some of the challenges my generation is currently facing are challenges that maybe my parents didn't have to think about as much when they were my age. And so it's definitely had me kind of shifting or making edits to that plan, saying, hey, maybe that's not going to be enough to account for everything that my generation and myself are dealing with. And so, yeah, I think my husband and I are definitely, when we look at our financial plan up towards retirement, we're definitely doing things differently than my parents did.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think when we talked a little bit about you kind of are the pandemic group. You got out of school and it was that pandemic. Now there's tariffs. There's kind of it the world doesn't look as settled. And it's I would say coming out of school, I came out of the school in '80s. I mean, things weren't necessarily calm, but it seemed like there was a path, right? And I think right now the path is a little bit more, people are interpreting and wondering, is the path still there? So what do you think, Nicole? How do you feel like being Gen Z and looking at the world and going, what's the plan? Is having a plan the thing to do?
Right. Yeah, and funny you brought up the pandemic. I wanted to talk about how when I graduated, it was in 2020, and I got my first job and my first opportunity to join a 401k plan during the pandemic. And so I definitely think that made me more cautious. And definitely I value the importance of diversification. You don't want all your funds in one place because you never know what might happen. So I think that did have a big part in kind of my financial plan for the future. And another big piece of it, I don't want to necessarily rely on someone else for financial stability in the future. I want to have that independence and have my own knowledge on, my financial future.
Yeah, I think my generation, we had more idea that we had progressed to good structures, right? Like, Social Security wasn't perfect, but it was going to be there. And I think you guys have been raised in an environment where Social Security has felt like it's on the ropes ever since you were aware of it. And so I think some of the normal structures on how things were supposed to happen look different. And so, Nicole, when you say, can't just rely on plan A, right? I can't just think that everything's going to go along that way. Yeah, the savvy Z's are looking hard at the assumptions. Um, for both of you, what did retirement planning look like in your family growing up? Was it something you were even aware of? Some families, I grew up, my parents were teachers, so they had pensions, but I wouldn't have known anything else about what I could do personally. Did you have an awareness of anything like this, like what retirement might look like? Or 15 years ago, you were in 8th grade, so maybe it was like just trying to make it to soccer practice. But what did it look like in your family? Did they talk much about stuff like that, or were you aware of what your parents were doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think my parents definitely, specifically my dad. He's kind of the breadwinner of our family, and so they're both my parents are kind of relying on his 401k that he has with his employer. And to my knowledge, that's kind of outside of like Social Security. That's kind of their that's what they're counting on as they get older, to supplement their income when they can no longer work. But I think it's interesting. Maybe these conversations kind of came up at various points when the stock market started doing really poorly, and they would talk, oh, these people can't retire, or people are pushing off retirement. And I would have conversations with my dad, like, what does that mean? Like, why can't they retire now? And now that I'm working in the retirement industry, I see it with like new eyes. And so it kind of does make me worried sometimes, to have like all my eggs, so to speak, in one basket, kind of speaking to what Nicole was saying, because, okay, if we're in a bad year, like the pandemic years, do you delay retirement? Are you even in a position to delay retirement at that time? And how is that going to affect your income, for the years that, you can't work in your 70s or 80s, et cetera. So, yeah.
Mhm.
It's a long runway.
Yeah.
What do you have to add, Nicole? Any thought about how your family viewed this topic at all? Was it even on the plate or no?
We didn't really talk about it in our house. We didn't necessarily avoid it, but I just never knew to ask questions, or didn't have an interest in it when I was younger. But when I did join the workforce and start having questions, I knew I could go to my parents. My dad, now I know, has been planning for his retirement since he started working. So he's been a wealth of knowledge now, and I know I can go to them as an adult.
No. For both of you, a follow-up question to this. For both of you, you've. I would say now, if you started today in a regular job, in any job in Illinois, there's Illinois Secure Choice. So right in front of you, there's already some kind of retirement plan. Was your first 401k plan experience like when you had the first real job, the first full-time job out of school, or when did that like even reach your horizon that it was available to you?
I found out that I had money invested in a retirement plan when I got a cash check suddenly in the mail, because my money had been forced out of the plan.
Wow.
I was like, this is so nice. It was actually, my first job was working retail, and I worked part-time, and I didn't, I started that job when I was 17. So I was not thinking about retirement. I had no idea at what point, they started putting some of my wages in a retirement plan. So then, like, I finally left that job, and I got a check one day in the mail, and I was like, this is nice. Where did this come from? And like tax season came around, and I was like, oh, this is not so nice anymore. But that was my first introduction to it, really.
Wow. At the tail end. When did you first get yours, Nicole?
My first full-time job. I had only worked as a waitress previously, so they did not offer anything to me then. But yeah, first full-time job was the 401k plan.
Just nowadays, there's almost some advantage, even though I fully believe 401k plans are, the best option on this, but with a lot of states and state mandates, even, depending on when the entry date is, but people can actually start having balances in state-sponsored plans. But you can see, wow, are they aware of it? When they leave their job, do they know that they were putting some money away? Is there $500, $1,000 somewhere that they didn't really know? So it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? It's good to get people going early, but it's really good if they're aware of it. Woo, big one. So, okay, Kalin, go for it.
I'd love to talk about the kind of the socioeconomics of retirement planning. Could you guys share a moment when you realized that your financial mindset was shaped more by how you were raised than by what you actually knew about, investing and retirement?
Yeah, so I was actually talking to my sister about it, and she has a friend over where she lives, and her friend at like 25 had all these investments that she was putting her money into separately, like just not even related to necessarily like a 401k or an IRA or anything like that, just a different kind of brokerage account. And I was shocked. I was like, she's 25 and she's and this is how she is securing her future and managing her money. And when I talked to my sister more about it, it just, that friend kind of came from, I think, a different socioeconomic background than we did, just maybe more affluent. And I think that that's how her parents manage their money. And so, naturally, even at 25, she's like, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to be doing. And so she was, putting, thousands of dollars into investments and reaping the earnings on those investments. And it just, like I said, it blew my mind. That was something that my sister and I didn't consider, definitely not in our 20s. So that was kind of a wake up call for us.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how you're talking about someone who was so ready for the investment world at such a young age. And the moment that came to my mind was in the early 2000s. I remember grocery shopping with my parents, and they would bring a little portfolio, like a little folio of coupons with them to the grocery store. And any way to save, any way to set extra money aside, even if they had extra to spend, it was always find ways to kind of save and have something in the bank that was extra to maybe save for the future or for future goals and things like that. So that's always kind of been my mindset, is even if you have it, you don't necessarily have to spend it. Set that money aside and invest it. But it wasn't until really later that I realized I kind of had that mindset when I started making those bigger investments and more high yield savings accounts and things like that.
Yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like my next question really fits into with what you were just saying, Nicole. What kind of messages did you receive growing up, either from your parents or your community, about money, risk, and financial independence? And how do you feel like those messages show up in your investing habits now or saving habits now? And Nicole, it sounds like, obviously your parents kind of instilled that mindset of saving, which some people do and some people don't. So if there's anything else.
Sure, yeah. I had piggy banks growing up. We would set money aside in our little piggy banks, and for birthdays, things like that, we would get $5, and then that would go towards something we wanted in the future. Definitely I carry that through in our savings account. We can now have buckets for if we want to go for a vacation or do home renovations. We always make sure to set aside for whatever it is that we have the goal set for.
So you weren't part of the generation where people Venmo'd you money yet when you were a kid? No.
That was new to me and probably about college.
Okay. I'm just laughing because I actually think that's what happens now.
Have you noticed the kids outside of the Cubs games with like they're selling lemonade, but they have like little Venmo? It's real. Yeah.
Even the Scouts, the Girl Scout cookies and things, they do that too. Yep.
So, there is gender dynamics and there's trust factors sometimes in finance. Definitely there's dominant beliefs. So have you ever felt dismissed or underestimated in a financial conversation? What did that experience teach you?
For me personally, rather than feeling dismissed, I just felt like these conversations weren't had with me directly a lot of the time. Actually, what I learned, like looking back in my life, a lot of people that did have these conversations with me were other women or some of my like girlfriends that are the same age as me. The person who talked me into, for example, even getting a credit card and how I can build credit that way was a friend my own age. But like, it's not something that I felt like my parents didn't necessarily have these conversations with me. And like I said, when I recall it, I largely got these messages from other women who I don't remember having a lot of financial conversations with the men in my life or male peers, but I do remember a lot of women just having very frank and honest conversations. My first retail job, I worked with women who were older than me, like middle-aged. And I remember them talking, one of them, actually, she was in her like 70s, and she's like, the work I did, there was no employer-sponsored qualified retirement plan. I didn't have a 401k. I didn't have anything like that. So when it comes to retirement time, she's relying solely kind of on the government, on Medicaid, on Social Security, and her husband had heart issues that were very costly. His medication was very costly. And she would kind of lament about that. She's like, I don't have any retirement savings to pull off to supplement my income. So at 76 years old, I'm still working this retail job because it's just not enough. And, you know, I have to pay for his medication. I have to pay for our rent, all of these things. I had another coworker, she was in her 50s, and she talked about how in a time in her marriage, they made a poor financial decision, and she ended up pulling almost all her retirement funds out. And that's affecting her now. When she looks at her retirement, she's like, well, now I don't have these funds. So it was just interesting, like either having my female friends my age to kind of talk to me about, hey, you need to start building up credit, or having these older women just be really frank and honest and just talk to me about how, you know, their decisions or along the way had impacted them as they got older and looking to retire. That was really insightful to me. But I think rather than being dismissed on a larger scale, a lot of people just didn't even have these conversations with me otherwise. So
Yeah. Wow. But that's an amazing resource.
yeah.
Lived experience really helps. Yeah. To hear people's
Really.
lived experience. Nicole, did you have any, did you either have resources, or did you feel talked down in financial situations?
Yeah, I don't really think I had many financial conversations really growing up, even in early adulthood. I would talk to my parents, but that's about it. So never really talked down to. And now my husband and I, we do talk candidly about finances. So there's always mutual respect in those conversations. And I recently was helping my father-in-law look at his investments to see how he can maybe adjust his portfolio. And we spoke to a financial advisor. And even in that situation, the advisor was very respectful of my questions. We were just having an open discussion. I never felt like put down just because I didn't understand something. And I was able to ask questions when I didn't understand.
Yeah. Oh. It does sound like there is kind of almost people that you knew, that you trusted, that you could ask. So you didn't really
Definitely.
have overt dismissive stuff, but you had people who had experience you could talk to. And I know in recently talking to someone, my generation, a lot of our mothers weren't working outside of the house. So it wasn't even their topic, you know. And then my mom was a teacher. Sometimes their moms were nurses. And then once again, either they had something highly structured, but nobody was doing things on their own. So actually, I'm semi-encouraged that you guys, either it was no knowledge, which isn't good, or there was some knowledge there. But how do you, I think when we talked in the beginning, and it's kind of a little bit on the AI thing, how do you figure out where you can trust the information that you get? Because you're living in a time period where there's a ton of information, and there's actually a ton of marketing, and how do you actually kind of sort through and find things that you can trust?
I look back to my time, even when I was in like high school and middle school. That was something that I do really praise my teachers for kind of instilling in me, was just this inherent or natural suspicion of the internet. They're like, hey, if you're going to write a paper, it needs to be a credible source, and it can't be these sources. Like, it needs to be a credible source. This is what a credible source looks like. And so I think I bring this into my job as well. You know, we look at very specific sources when we need to research a topic. We always turn to the IRS or ASPA, and we're not just going on any website to get the answers for our clients or for ourselves. But I really think that kind of early instruction in school prepared me for an AI world to some extent, because I'm like, okay, if we go to AI and we ask a question, then the first thing I want to look at is what websites are they pulling that answer from? And I want to make sure that that's a credible source, and or that they're interpreting the information on that website correctly in their summary.
That's amazing. Teachers trained you to be naturally suspicious of sources, so that's good. Nicole, did your teachers teach you to be naturally suspicious of what you find out, or what do you think?
Yeah, 100%. My mom is actually an English teacher as well. So I had it coming from school and also at home. She would review my papers and things and make sure I have all credible sources. So definitely, I was hesitant for a while to even go on AI websites and use that as a resource because I was afraid that, the information wasn't good or wasn't accurate. But I think it's a good starting point, but definitely the sources that it's pulling from, you need to check and make sure they are accurate and correct.
Wow. This may be the success story of the American educational system 15 years ago, right?
Definitely right here.
They did a great job then. Okay, Kalin, do you want to go on to Social Security?
Yeah, well, there was one other thing I wanted to ask about AI. Do you think that AI has the ability to kind of close the financial literacy gap, especially for younger people or people who didn't grow up with parents who were investing? Do you guys worry that with AI and the kind of not always that verified information, that people will be getting inaccurate information if they're leaning on those kinds of tools?
I think AI is a great starting point. If you are feeling like totally overwhelmed and you don't, I think you can go to AI with very basic questions, and it is very helpful in that regard. It can help break down information in a more simple, easy to digest way. My concern more so is like if we rely on AI for all the answers, and if we're not willing to try and do some of the research on our own or double check the resources that AI is pulling from. I think that the way that I've used AI or the way that people I know have used AI, like I said, to just kind of like put your foot in the door and just say like, okay, help me kind of know where to start, or like even like the simplest terms, like what is this? What am I looking at? It's good for that. But too much back and forth, and I think AI can take you down a path that maybe isn't so founded in fact and reality. And so at some point you have to kind of get comfortable with the idea of doing some independent research on your own to verify what you're learning through AI.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
Very good. I think some of the other generations might think it's more magical than that. So it seems like you have
there's things that you think it can do that are just like that are quite simple. That the AI is like, I'm thinking, and it's been 20 minutes, and you're like, really, this wasn't that hard.
Okay, you want to move on to Social Security, Kalin?
Yeah, absolutely. And Katherine mentioned this earlier. I think other generations, Katherine's generation, and even when I was growing up, they talked about the viability of Social Security, but I still, growing up, definitely thought that I would have Social Security. I thought I might have problems down the line, but I thought I was going to pay into it, and it would pay out for me in the end. And those kinds of safety nets, with things like the pandemic, the recent tariffs, and that kind of growing uncertainty around Social Security. Do you guys feel like your generation is losing trust in like kind of financial systems that older generations relied on? And what do you feel like your relationship is with those systems?
Yeah, I definitely feel like our generation is losing trust. I think that so many people my age do not anticipate getting any money from Social Security. I think people still my age, from what I've heard from talking to people my age, I think we still generally have trust in like 401k plans, for example. But I think that there is some growing apprehension even there. Earlier this year, we saw how the introduction of some pretty steep tariffs caused the markets to really fluctuate drastically. And suddenly, once again, kind of like similar to we had these conversations in 2008, we had them in the pandemic, and it seems like even this year that conversation comes up, do I have to delay retirement? Can I retire? If I take money out of my 401k, is this really going to hinder me down the road when am I going to run out of funds essentially sooner than I'd like, because I'm withdrawing money in a year in which the stock market is, doing really poorly. And so I think that these what's happening in our current events in the world today is definitely informing the conversations I have at home with my husband and what we're doing to save. Once again, to kind of to Nicole's point from earlier, we are kind of diversifying our investments, and that looks different for everyone. But we have put some more money, for example, in real estate and other things like that, trying to ensure that when we retire, we have some sort of passive income, so we don't have to work at a time where we might be too sick, too ill to work. So that's kind of how I look at it, and definitely how my husband and I are aligned on this point too, for sure.
Nicole, do you have anything anything to add, or what do you think?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that diversification is key in our household too, just because we don't feel like we can necessarily rely on those institutions anymore. So my husband does a lot of the research, and he's very invested in the stock market, ETFs, mutual funds, things like that. So he will sometimes use AI just to see what's kind of trending, what's performing well, and then do his own research and see, what the best investments are at the time. So hopefully in the future we have a range of options and a safety net almost in the future.
I laugh. I think it's in your lifetime that they really talked a lot about the gig economy, which sometimes I laugh. It just sounds like an extra part-time job, but I don't. Do you feel like your generation
Usually
feels
it's
like
4 part-time jobs?
Yeah, I know. Do you feel like you need to have like a gig going or something? Always have something that's like. Actually, Amanda, you were talking about being able to get some passive income doing stuff. Maybe you've already answered this. You have to diversify in a whole bunch of different ways, and that may actually make your generation stronger. You're more resilient through kind of the crazy stuff we've given you.
Your generation has to be resilient given all the stuff you've already dealt with
Right.
in such a short period of time.
So, last couple of questions. Is there any financial myth that you've had, that you grew up with, that you've had to unlearn?
For me, it was actually, I was kind of told or led to believe that people who don't have a lot of money don't know how to manage their money. And what I've learned since, like, I had a health scare years ago, and the hospital bill I received depleted nearly all my savings. And it was a reminder that as diligently as I save and try and watch my spending, sometimes you're just one emergency away from losing everything, and that it takes a lot more effort to climb up the ladder than to fall down it.
Yeah.
And so that's one message that I'm trying to unlearn, definitely, and just be a lot more empathetic toward people who are struggling, because I've definitely been there personally.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything for you, Nicole, that a financial myth or message that you feel like you've had to unlearn? Something you were raised with and now you kind of go, I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely, when I was younger, thought that having money in a savings account, earning interest, was just fine. Interest was going to help, I could watch my money grow. But now I know there's a lot more higher earning investment opportunities that could go a lot further and yield a lot more for the future.
Yeah, more diversity. Yeah. So, and I'll make this the last one. So, is there anything about the way that money is talked about that you would change? Any way you think we should shift the conversation about how money's talked about? That we create barriers by just the way we talk about it? Is there anything that you can think of on that?
I think that conversational taboos, money is typically considered one of those. And I wish it wasn't, because kind of going back to what I said earlier, I really credit some of the women in my life who have been willing to risk judgment just to kind of have those frank, candid conversations with me, those are the people I learned from. They talked about their mistakes. They talked about how they manage their money, what their money like, what their financial situation even looked like. And I was taking notes and I was learning from their experiences. So I think that my desire would be that we have more frank and honest and candid conversations with each other, so then we can learn from our collective experiences. I feel like maybe there's unintentional, just like gatekeeping, or just like we're holding so much information back, when the younger generation, my generation, or even people younger than me could really learn from the lessons we've already learned.
Oh,
So
no, that's great. Anything you think how the conversation should be shifted, Nicole?
No, that was my first thought as well, is just to make it more accessible, more candid and conversation, less technical jargon, because not everybody understands that right off the bat. So having those conversations even, more casually at a younger age, just to build a groundwork for as you grow older, I think would make a big difference. I never had a class in school that taught me anything, about financials and savings or anything like that. And it's so important.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time on this. I feel what I love about podcasts is I feel like I learn things just going through it. And I, part of the whole reason for this podcast is I do feel like there's been kind of a generational bias in terms of how to look at things. And I'm already deeply encouraged that you guys have a sense of curiosity and diversification and really questioning, but still doing things. You haven't just gone, it doesn't make sense, we're not doing anything. It's like, I'm thinking it through and I'm coming up with multiple plans. So,
and both of you didn't start off in this business, but kind of have ended up here, which I think is interesting, because a lot of other generations, you would have kind of started in one business and stayed in one company for like 40 or 50 years. But you guys are already kind of, that's it. We have a different mold for younger generations, I think.
Yeah.
And you guys are really emblematic of that.
Yep. Well, thank you so much. So if you have questions or comments, please comment on the bottom of our page on this. Always, if you have very specific questions, the email is sales@huntbenefits.com. We definitely appreciate you listening, and we appreciate all your thoughtful answers. Amanda and Nicole, thank you so much. Take care. Have a great evening.
Thank you.